welcome everyone. As Mesa said, this is a live recording of this episode in our collaboration with VCU Qatar and the Tasmeem conference. I'm honored to welcome our two special guests. The first is Yara Khoury Nammour, who is an award-winning graphic designer and typographer. Her research interests include Arabic typography, particularly bilinguality, type design, legibility, book design, modular systems, and much more. Yara is currently an assistant professor at the American University of Beirut and an independent designer since 2017, after a longstanding career of 20 years as a design director at Muhtaraf Design House, excuse me, sorry. Her work is published, speaking of legibility, her work is published in several international books and has authored a book titled Nasri Khattar at Modernist Typotect from Khat Books, which we're going to be talking about later on. Also, I'm excited to introduce our second guest. Lara Captan is an independent type designer and typographer based in Amsterdam. As a research practitioner, Lara strives to provide alternative pathways to designing Arabic typefaces, both in form and technology, in order to drive Arabic type to its utmost potential. Since March 2015, Lara has been designing Arabic typefaces for multiple technologies. She regularly speaks at type conferences and design events around the world. In March 2016, she co-founded Arabic Type Design Beirut with Christian Sarkis. It is the first international educational program dedicated to Arabic type design. Welcome, Yara. Welcome, Lara. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the title of today's talk is, the future of basically script in this region. So I'm curious, maybe we can start speaking to both of you about a really basic question. Do you think other languages and designers who focus on typography in other languages think about questions like the future of this language? So are people in France or in Amsterdam, let's use Amsterdam, Lara, because you're there. Are designers in Holland thinking about what is the future of script in Holland?
I guess always, and I think everywhere in the world probably, and well, especially here they're kind of at the forefront of the type industry in a way, or they have been, and so it's a human thing, right? Because we need fonts now for all our text iterations in all sorts of mediums. So people worry about, what does this text look like, and does it represent us?
Yeah. So maybe if you can give us, and Yara, feel free to jump in. Yeah. Just let's remove the word Arab or Arabic from the conversation for a second. And for those of us who are not designers like me and are a little uninformed, what is the conversation like globally about the future of script, so that we can get a broader sense about what the themes are that people are thinking about, and then let's sort of root it in the regional context. Either of you can sort of jump in. Yara, go for
it. I think as long as language is there and we're talking in it, the script is there to go along with it. As long as we're reading it, it is there and alive. Now, the question of whether it's Arabic or not Arabic, I think it's a more pertinent question to hear, because here we're having a conversation about the Arabic script in English. So you might think that the language is dying because we're not using it, and thus everything that goes and the visual manifestation of the language dies with it. But I think I would go back to late 80s when David Carson said the end of print, or was it 90s? And it proved not true so much. So it lives on because we read. Whether we read it on screen or on paper, it doesn't matter. So I don't think there's any danger in losing the script, as long as we still speak it and read in it and use it every day, even if it's local or Fusha or whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So let's let's talk a little bit. I want to ask you a question a little bit about your career and about the bio that I just read. there's this word that I don't think I've ever said before, which is bilinguality. Why is that the first word in the list of things that you are particularly interested in? And what is that? And how is that related to where sort of the script may be going?
I think it starts with our education system, of course, but I won't go that far back. I mean, I will start with my career at Al Muhtaraf. And I was educated in a Western-centric university in graphic design. I actually wanted to do translation before, but when I joined Muhtaraf, I remember opening all the books there from left to right, the English way, and they were written in Arabic. And then I would say, oops, no, it's the other way around. And by the end of a year or two, by the end of my second year, I was actually opening the Latin books the other way around. So it's a matter of habit, okay, and reading more. I decided that I really need to read more in Arabic more, because I wasn't reading at all at the time. I was really reading everything and using the Latin letters all the time. And Muhtaraf gave me that opportunity to rethink about and be actually aware of my bilinguality, to be honest. I wasn't aware that I was bilingual at all. I was like, this is the way we talk. So flipping books right to left and left to right made me aware that there's something going on there that I really need to consider in much more depth.
Yeah. What are some of the, yeah, what does it, so you started studying, you've been in this business for decades at this point. I love thinking about sort of past futures. And so at the time when you first started working and learning about some of the challenges that are coming around the bend, what were some of those challenges 20 years ago? And are we still working on the exact same challenges, or has progress been made? And maybe Yara, you can speak first, and then Lara, I see you nodding along too, so you can chime in.
I'll just be nodding.
Yeah, go for it, Lara. If you think about when you first started getting into the business and started studying, are we still looking at the same future and waiting for the same future to happen, or do you feel like some sort of progress has been made?
Are you answering this, Yara, or am I going?
I should start speaking. I should start asking you by your last names, because Lara and Yara.
It'll be confusing, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm a generation a bit later than Yara, so probably already things have been solved compared to her. Well, I hope, because 10 years ago when I started, things were, for me, a lot worse in the field of Arabic type, at least. And it's nice to see that, well, by a lot worse, I mean, there was this dominant stream for Latinizing Arabic in a way that comes from global brands branding locally in the UAE and the Arabian Peninsula.
And culturally.
Yeah, exactly. Yara, you're a part of that.
And it's fine. Like, there are phases in things move in certain ways, and in a way we have such a big knowledge gap in the field of type that it's still, to me, like a blank page. That there's so much to be done, which is super cool because it gives us the opportunity to dream a lot, actually. Whereas if you're designing Latin, it's like, oh yeah, you work on little details, and still things still change. But now it's like us, it's like, no, not detail. It's like major dinosaur ahead. So for me, that was the main challenge. And then how to address that was my question when I started. And it turned out to be, and I didn't know, or I had a feeling, but a problem of form and a problem of technology. But I didn't know how deep the problem of technology was back then. Form, I think we have a beautiful past that we can dig information from and then deconstruct and reconstruct, etc.
Okay, interesting. I want to go back to that for a second. Then I want to go back to that sentence, the problem of form versus problem of technology. But before we do, Yara, if you can talk about the question that Lara was speaking about sort of the past futures and where we are now compared to where we were when you started.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into detail, and I mean it's very similar. There's not that big gap. It's very similar between the form and the technology. But I think the idea of past future is great because, and this is where Lara and I completely coincide, because I think that the past is our future and we cannot let it go. I mean, the design history we read, and I just read History of Arabic Graphic Design, and I gave a review on the book, and the path as represented in design history is the future, because whatever we had designed, our ancestors, is designing us now as we live. So it's an ongoing process. It's a very iterative process, and it is not the past, it is the future. So I like that past future tense now.
But is it not the present?
Yes, of course, but the present now is the past already, and the future is in 2 minutes. I mean, whatever we design is part of our cumulative effort and cumulative visual rhetoric, visual database.
Yeah. Okay. So let me try to ask the question a little more precisely. I feel like in some of the previous conversations we've had with some of your colleagues and some of your very close friends on the series, other typographers and folks who are interested in typography more broadly, they'll talk about the 80s and 90s and early 2000s when brands were sort of matching exact style, stylistically matching. This came up with our conversation with Wael about Burberry, right? When they redesigned Burberry, they were looking at the way it was done before and saying that was really sort of breaking all these rules in a bad way, sort of maybe lazy. And so I'm curious if you're thinking about the strides forward in the 90s and early 2000s, if you're looking at that saying, oh, we have to get away from that. Those were huge mistakes. Or is there something to have learned back then and sort of say, no, those weren't mistakes. That was just a different trend. And that was we have to sort of go back further.
I'm not sure calling them mistakes is the right word.
Great.
I think looking back at where we were in the 90s and to early 2000s, when we were doing all those Latinized logos, and I'm culpable of this, as what Lara was saying, we were actually thinking that we were breaking ground at the time, and we were doing very modern Arabic. But with new trends and people getting more into the history of the text and getting much more flexible with the calligraphy and seeing all the detailing and the richness there, I think we missed out on a lot of details and a lot of history behind us, thinking that we threw it away just because of a technological barrier. And the technology barrier is not there anymore, so we're fine. We can look wherever we want, but I would not like to say it was a mistake. It was part of the path of experimentation. And if you look at design history, lots of mistakes were called, lots of things that we read about today are called mistakes at the time. But then they go back down in history as something that is part of the development of the script, part of the experimentation, what you throw out and what you keep. So it's like a sieve, غربال, of things, and you decide what you keep and what you throw out. So,
and I think scripts always kind of reveal a certain what the context is. It's like in any visual culture, we learn about history through, in a way, art and remnants of past creations that really tells us what's going on in society in a way. And it was a moment where Europe and North America were advancing tremendously in terms of technologies and machinery, etc. And so us in our not such great moment in history, you look up to these places. And you see it in the form. It's in a way which is also, you know, kind of nice. You can then look back and say, okay, this was what's going on. Plus, globalization was at the beginning of it. You know, it was also a new thing. And then, which means it was also a new question. How does my brand reflect this global brand locally? Which now it becomes an easy question, but before, it's also a kind of a challenge. Still is, actually.
Yeah. I wonder, what are some of the underlying forces, whether they're economic forces or, you know, geopolitical forces or technological forces that are forcing some of the, or that are that may be triggering some of these changes going forward? Are there things that maybe the common person isn't noticing, whether it's like, you know, decisions by Netflix on how to subtitle stuff, or choices, what's happening with, you know, the metaverse, or I have no idea, right? But are there sort of underlying choices being made that may shape the way Arabic script will look in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years that maybe I'm not really even thinking about?
That's a good question.
Yara, go for it.
I think the digital age and the social media have really affected us a lot, in a sense that there is an Arab typophile somehow. That everybody knows about what we do and the importance of what we do. Is it disconnecting? Is it okay? Okay. And with globalization and the economy and the political logic of late capitalism, you see a lot of homogenization on Instagram. Like, you see a lot of archival efforts. Every city is archiving its own type, or its own lettering, or its own calligraphy, or its own signs. So, and it's not only my feed, I see it on my children's feed. So they're aware of calligraphy and lettering, and they want to do it, not because their mother is into it, but because it gets on their feed. So there is a new Arab typophile, I can say. And this is because of the digital and online and, you know, social media. It has paved the way for a much easier job for us, because we used to talk about educating our clients as if we need, and I'm not sure this is the right word to go to use, but now we have to do it much less because they already know a lot, and they're aware of the importance of, and because of designers who have done the work like Wael, Christian, Fajak, Lara, and a lot more. I mean, they have put out the word that we need to go back and see our history and go through that and not throw it all out. So it's not new anymore. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. How do you, sorry, go ahead, Lara, go for it.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's a good question, because I work closely with the tech industry, and I've observed them through time refuse or take on certain decisions in order to accommodate or not accommodate for certain scripts. Of course, Arabic is the script of Islam, and so on the US West Coast, where all of the computer is born and all decisions made in order to accommodate for text or not is taken still there. And so I've been on certain conversations where they're like, oh, Arabic, oh yeah, all the decorative stuff, you know, like in Arabic, we can elongate letters and make a swashy letter. So like a ba that is normally like a boat can go like this because it can. They're like, these, we don't need them, you know, like whatever. So certain things are often heavily disregarded. And again, it's always like a political, but a practical thing. So the computer is also this, you know, these companies have big workflows, and then thinking of small people with little problems, things slip out. And this has happened through time and in history in multiple different machines, like in the past, like the linotype machine, which is this machine that would create one line of metal text, where there Arabic underwent a very big simplification because it had to accommodate for the machine capacity, which was built for Latin. So these things do happen, and they push the script in certain directions. Now we can lobby, as Yara was saying, and push back to a certain extent, and then things can still take a lot of time and a lot of lobbying and happen and not. But you know, it's the way it is. So there is power involved in a way. Of course, there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fascinating field in that sense. Sometimes
push forward, let's say, rather than push back.
Yeah, push forward. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about just a basic question. You may not know the answer to it, but it may spur other questions. I feel like the future of any language is at this point almost entirely dictated by the large tech companies, who get to decide the future of the way any language looks, who get to decide what the basic fonts are. So like on Instagram stories, right, you have like in English and in Latin, you have like these 5 different standard ones that you're allowed to write on your image with, right? What is the process with which you get to those get chosen?
Well, it's getting better now also, because of there's this, well, is it a trend? I don't know. A good thing happening in the world, which is a diversity, inclusion, and all of its forms are becoming very important socially. And therefore, a lot of minority scripts and rare scripts are being now supported. And I just finished work for Google, and they do not care about proper implementation of writing, and I'm sure Apple does as well. So yeah, I think things are shifting, and therefore you get chosen. Yeah, I don't think you can. You have to meet people and send your work, I guess. It's mostly in conferences that you meet these people, and you're like, oh, hey, look. Do they find us? They sometimes
to go for it. Yeah.
I'm not sure about socially acceptable and diversity is the bottom line of getting Arabic included. I think the numbers add up. And because Arabic is one of the fastest growing languages, it is only economically viable for Google and Apple and the big tech to actually just implement proper Arabic that is acceptable by everybody that speaks and writes and reads the language. So it wasn't economically viable before, and now it is. And they've opened their eyes to that fact. And it's not about decolonization or diversity, or maybe I'm a bit skeptical, but this is what I think the bottom line is. This is my opinion.
I agree with you. I mean, in general, I think there has to be, capitalism isn't swayed by non-capitalistic intentions, right? So insofar as these organizations have bottom lines and they have shareholders, that is the language they are going to speak. But I'm curious, what is the process with which certain progressive or high quality typefaces get included in those types of platforms, as opposed to the ones that are just lying around that maybe seem problematic or don't seem like they are going in the direction that you would hope that we would go?
It's a bit different nowadays. I don't think people, these companies buy system fonts anymore. Like, it depends on the company. Apple is pretty close, so they will make custom fonts and will hire designers. Google will pay little for a Libre or free font that they can open source, and then they have their own branding fonts, which then comes back to a custom font, and then you count on your fingers. We're like 10 Arabic type designers in the world, almost, including Iran, and or max 40. So then, it doesn't leave. It's not so many people yet. I don't think you can Yeah, so system fonts, you know, where things come into the software, like you open Microsoft Word or Chrome, and then you can suddenly use your font. That I don't see that happening so often anymore. Yara, do you see like system font acquisition? I think
No.
everything, all these companies have libraries now. It's so cloud-based.
Yeah, and it's cheaper. It's quite yes, it's quite available. With font libraries, it's quite available. So you don't need a working system font as much as you did before, for example.
Yeah.
And the availability of typefaces wasn't in the 90s that much. We had Quark Express and AXT fonts, and we had to buy dongles for thousands of dollars and put them in each computer. And we had Anan, Muna, and I don't know what. And these are the acceptable ones. But now, no, you can. The access is much more available and wider, and you just really need to know a bit about it and have a good. For students, you can have a good teacher that tells you, you know, an instructor tells you these are the libraries you go to. These are the and you actually have to sort of educate the students on how to decide what a good typeface is. And then you go back and say, what is the intention of the use? And all of that goes into the storyline of how to choose a typeface. So now the choices are there. I'm not sure.
But if you're a starter, a person who's designed the font and you want to put it out there, I guess you need to publish it somehow. So which means that you need to self-publish or publish through a reseller. So I think that would then be the only way to get it out there.
I want to go back to a topic I mentioned before we started the call, which is Yara, your book about Nasri Khattar. And I'd love to have you just give us a little bit of a primer of who this person is, and in conjunction who Saida Ael is, and what drew you into writing this book, and why you think this subject may be related to the future of the script.
Oh, that's jumping. Okay, first of all, I got through Nasri Khattar through Saida Ael. I got to Nasri Khattar through Saida Ael. He was a friend of the family, Saida Ael, and he had shared his books with us, like this one, yes. And I learned how to read the language, the script that he had come up with, the 48 letter forms. And it took me just one afternoon to go back and forth over the back of the cover just to make sure that this letter is that. So, for example, you not knowing how to read al-muhtaraf, if you were reading it in Saida Ael's letters, you would have no difficulty at all. So
exactly.
And of course, these are newspapers that he had published using his letter forms. He wanted to propagate this style, but and this was one of my thesis, my MA thesis, or I designed these letter forms, the Latin ones. But what got me to Khattar was also part of the research I was doing during my MA, and he's an architect, actually. He was born in Mansouri, he's Lebanese architect. He studied at AUB, at the American University of Beirut, and this is where he encountered the idea. He came out with the idea of unified Arabic letter forms, which is letters, Arabic letters that don't change form according to their position in the word, as is customary in Arabic. And he said that it worked. He thought at the time in the 1930s, early 30s, when he tried it, that it worked. And because it was of a technological barrier also, because he made the mistake on a typewriter, and the typewriter's own limited keyboard didn't allow for a lot of variations in the letters. So when he typed the same letter here, actually, twice, it worked. And at that time, by the 1937 or 38, he had drawn all the letter forms. And it's not about disconnected letter forms, it's about unified letter forms. So it could be connected easily, but it's just not changing the shape according to what comes before and after it. He spent his whole lifetime carrying this idea through with lots of funding from Ford Foundation. He worked for Saudi Aramco at the time, as a calligrapher and designer. And he set up his own studio and organization here called Unified Arabic World or something like this, UAA, and association. And he did a lot of exhibitions trying to propagate that idea of unified Arabic. But technology actually stole the advancement of technology, just took the rug out from underneath his feet. And his idea was not valid anymore, because there was no reason, since we can change the letter forms according to their position technologically. But he still fought for it as a legibility and a literacy cause, that thinking, and we don't know, actually, nobody has done the research, if these letters actually help people who are starting to read the Arabic language get acquainted with it at the beginning in Shuf Baba Shuf, and then move on to the classic calligraphy that we know, that it's a stepping stone towards the Arabic that we read, the script that we read every day.
So do you, I'm deeply fascinated by Saeed A'il's work, and I'm curious, do you know of typographers who are trying to take this seriously today and saying, how can we create, given the technological advances, how can we create Chrome extensions? How can we create things that are able to as easy as it would be to bold something, to completely unify it or switch to a different script, and same language, just different script. Is there anyone working on this?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know, Lara, if you're aware of it, but no, not that I'm aware of. I mean, no.
Students often study this phenomenon. Also, like in Lebanon, we use the chat, or well, in some places, chat language with the numbers. I think this also has been a topic on many students I've met.
Yeah.
In type, in a way, this becomes a political decision. Like
it's a philosophical choice.
Yeah, and it's like you then impose, and then you have a strong government who's going to get a whole lot of thinkers and people, and then you're going to have to review the way knowledge has been written for a long time in order for it to be accessible. And yeah, so it's a long. I think it would be a difficult project in a way, unless it goes gradually.
Yeah, Saeed A'il's idea was that the Phoenician alphabet, it started with Phoenicians, of course, and since the Phoenician alphabet, as we know that it traveled to the West and became the Latin alphabets that we use today, I mean, why should we that exported the alphabet not go back to that?
Yeah.
So that was his sort of logic behind it. But anyway, it is political, very politicized, and actually that was part of Nasri Khattar's fight.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, in my mind, if it's disassociated from the political nature in the Lebanese context, and just given for literacy purposes, right? Saying, okay, can we have a typeface that is in Arabic, and then in the same way you could change it from italics or bold, you could also change it to the sort of the texting Twitter version. Like, is that part of some possible future, or is that sort of like a cute student project, like, nah, that's not going to work?
I really hope we don't drop our script, to be honest.
I mean, it is very, Unified Arabic is very sexy for students, because you have only 30 letters to design. So it's, as Lara said, it's always a nice project for students to do, because they find it easier to design these letter forms. But other than that, just technologically and on a broader scale to get that implemented, I think it's far-fetched. I think it's far-fetched.
I think detached Arabic could be fine, but as long as it's Arabic. The question of using Latin letters in Arabic, that's also another. So for me, that's where, that's where it's like, oh, it would be a pity because it also creates a weird sense of identity. Like I spoke to many people in Turkey, and they're like, oh, our ginormous past of Arabic calligraphy, and then they're catapulted somewhere different, but it's there. So they have a kind of this. They often have this romanticism of, oh, I wish we could read Ottoman in a way. You feel that in their culture, because also in Ottoman are many texts that they do not have access to anymore. Also, because they cannot read the letters. They could understand probably Ottoman because it's similar. So anyway, so that these are two different things. I'm personally fine with detached Arabic if it works well. It has to work well.
Sure.
And it's pretty readable. Nasri Khattar's.
I think because he was a calligrapher, Lara. I mean, he had his roots in calligraphy, and he tried a lot. And seeing the sketches, the enormous amount of sketches he did with each letter to get that right. I mean, that's why it worked somehow, and could easily read it because of that connection.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to get to these quick Q&A, and then we're going to open it up to the questions in the chat, because I'm sure there will be many. So we'll do Yara and then Lara first. So let's start with this. What are you reading or watching right now?
I watched The Professor and the Madman.
Oh, interesting.
On Netflix, and watch it. It's great. It's about somebody who's trying to build the Oxford Dictionary, and it's about language, and it's live, how alive it is and changing, and they could never finish it, and it finished like way more years after the guy died. So I think the cumulative effort of language is super important in that movie. What I'm rereading Brave New World. I'll just again, because I read it when I was too young, and I think I have a completely different take on it now.
Yeah. Cool. Lara?
Yeah. So besides reading What to Feed My Child and How, because I have a 7-month-old baby and I'm confused. I'm also reading Alexandre Najar, who's a famous Lebanese writer, Syndrome de Beirut. It's in French, The Syndrome of Beirut. And he wrote that after the Beirut explosion, and he takes the fiction kind of in nonfiction. I'm at the beginning, so I cannot tell you much, but it does start from the story of somebody who lived the event. And I guess he will deconstruct our amazing reality back there in Lebanon in his way.
All right. It sounds like the What to Feed Your Child is more enjoyable reading. Easier reading, at least.
It's definitely easier.
Yeah. Okay, so Yara, who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
Well, the easiest answer to that is Khattar. I wrote a whole book about him without actually meeting him. So I would really love to shadow him. And
be careful what you wish for. Do you think?
Nasri Khattar, definitely. Just to get my facts checked.
Yeah. Lara, what about you?
Yeah, I would love to hang out with Frida Kahlo for a day. That would really make me happy. I really find her work fabulous, and I'm sure she was a pretty cool, feisty woman.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. What do people most misunderstand about your work?
I think they don't misunderstand it anymore. I used to have a lot of trouble explaining what I did. And when I first started, I always referred to the cigarette pack in your hand. I designed that. And that was the easiest thing I did, or the book you just read. And now I don't have to do that a lot. So I'm fine with that. When it comes to design, to to talking about the research, then I have some trouble, because about bilinguality and what is there to understand about that? What is there to understand about type and how we read it? And they don't know. I mean, there's something people around don't understand how omnipresent type is.
Yeah.
And omnipotent. I like these two words a lot, because, when I started telling them about the details, and they say, oh, wow, that is something, but that's in your own world, like you're digging a hole deep enough for you. But let us go on, read whatever we read, and go on with our lives. So, yeah.
So Yara, before, let me ask you a question. That young designer who, in a cheeky way, said, I designed the cigarette pack in your hand. What did she also not understand about the omnipotency of the work that she was doing?
Oh, yeah. I think I didn't understand at the time how much what I designed at the time designs us back now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes, and I think, and every typeface I design, although I've only designed custom typefaces, you see that people reading it, and there's a lot of power that has gone into it, and you don't understand it until you see it. And then it changes the landscape around you. The more you design these typefaces and you see, oh, but that has actually accumulated into another form and another shift and another trend. And that I did not understand. I was like, oh, I designed this and built. And I think we should really stop a bit on getting the job done only. And that is my shift. When I shifted to the American University of Beirut, I realized that. And I realized a little bit before entering academia that really I should stop only doing and think a little bit more, because I'm a bit more responsible.
You said I only design custom typefaces, almost as if to say, don't worry, I only design custom typefaces.
Yeah.
So like, it's almost as if like Twitter came to you and said, Yara, I want you to design the Arabic that will be seen by 1 billion people who post 1 trillion tweets every single day.
I would not sleep for a year, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of responsibility that goes with it. And I mean, looking at Dubai Expo now, and looking at the typeface that is for the Dubai Expo, and Dubai Expo says this is the future of our existence. And when you see a typeface and an Arabic typeface that goes with Dubai Expo, and you say, is that it?
Yeah.
And you question, and maybe it is, maybe it's not, but there's a lot of decision when it comes to something like this, like a Dubai Expo about the future of civilization, because all the world expos are that. So I think there's also, it's not about Twitter only. You can look at something like Dubai Expo 2020 and say there's a lot of responsibility there too.
Yeah. Lara, what about you? What do you think people most misunderstand about your work?
I think, at least I feel, because I'm not sure, but since I know for myself that I didn't make the work I want to be doing yet, I take time and I do it in like kind of stages. I wanted to get informed and about the past or whatever I could, and then make something, a font or a font family or a few, and then build from there to go further into what I believe. I think the fonts should look like today, at least, and a bit tomorrow. So I think that people probably see me as a traditionalist sometimes. At least that's what I feel, which is I absolutely don't think so. But with what's out there, maybe that's what they see.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you actually real quick. There's this Architectural Digest story about your work, and it's like at Expo 2020, Lara Captan is reclaiming reclaiming Arabic script, right? Or re-celebrating Arabic type, something like that, at Expo Dubai, this stuff. And I was wondering if when you read a Reimagine Arabic, calligraphy benches that reimagine Arabic, I wonder if that when you see something like that and you didn't write the copy, if you kind of cringe, if you're like, I'm not doing that, or if you're like, yes, I am doing it. I am trying to reimagine.
No, yeah, you know, journalism.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no, I did not use these. I would never use these words, of course.
Yeah.
I often use I'm playing or experimenting with, and trying to maintain some form of line between heritage and modernity, or the past and the present, and towards the future, in different ways. And so I will respect the past, and I will say I'm trying to give it a local contemporary voice.
Sure.
So that's what I would say.
Cool. Sorry, I'm losing track of time. Okay, so real quick, Yara and then Lara, outside of your profession, whose work inspires you? And then we're going to open up for questions.
I'm not going to say writers.
Sure.
I'm really inspired by writers who words come out of them so fluently. And mostly Amin Maalouf, because he's such a good storyteller, and I love good storytellers. Yeah. And the way he mixes history with stories and the plot. So yeah, his work really inspires me.
Amazing. Lara, what about you?
Yeah. Difficult. A lot of people inspire me, but I guess the summary of them all, whether it is they're inventors or just normal people like women working in Mongolia stitching our future T-shirt, they're people who really like work hard and kind of you know, go forward with reality and like their realities, whether they fight like prisoners of conscience. I also really admire these activists who dare to go against regimes and be like, I don't care, they're going to throw me in jail and get tortured, but I will speak what I need to, I will do what I need to do as a human being. So these people, these kinds of people I really admire. And
yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's start with Ahmad, I think is up first. Ahmad, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question. I think Yara and Lara, I think we may go a few minutes over if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. Let me read his question for him. Can we separate the work of Said Ael from Lebanese Christian nationalism? This needs to be analyzed and critiqued politically from a decolonial standpoint, to be exact. So I think we mentioned this a little bit already, but maybe Yara, you can just address it directly.
This needs a bit deeper research. I think I can't answer that. It's not. When I read about him, he didn't come from that, but I don't know. Maybe deeper research would actually prove to be exactly this. Yeah. Of course, because of Christian nationalism also adopted that idea heavily, but I'm not sure that he himself wanted that. For starters,
it's definitely worth exploring. Great question. Next question is Basma. Do you want to read it? Hey,
Yara. Great to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I think you both touched upon this. It's just, you know, I just wanted you to maybe to briefly talk about your Falak typeface, Lara, and you know, because we were talking about this idea of modern Arabic and coming from a, you know, universal design approach, and then, you know, ornamentation or excessive kind of design is kind of frowned upon still, even within the region. And I know that you worked on this typeface extensively, and yeah, maybe you can talk very briefly about it.
Is it possible? It's a ginormous project, but Falak was to be simple. So Falak Ace, Falak OTL, because another Falak typeface exists already. It was my way of asking a question: how can I step one step away from calligraphy? So it's a low contrast typeface, which for me in low contrast means I am moving into a more modern area while retaining all of the qualities of the script. but just one step away. So I wasn't going to go all the way because I don't know how to go all the way far away from calligraphy. So it was a project in that shape-wise, and in technology, it's made in a very special way for two technologies. One, the one we use every day, and another one which is invented by Dutch people called typeface. And so Falak is made in pieces. It's like a puzzle, and programmed that way. And it took 5 years for me to finish one font, one style, as we say in Lebanese. How do we say that in English?
From the heart.
So anyway, so it was really trying to tell people out there, especially the tech industry, listen, there's another way of doing this, of computing text in a minimal way. And for me to see, is it viable? Is it possible? Is it functional? So yeah, Falak is a bunch of questions and comparisons.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks, Basma. Ahmed, you're up next. Are you there? Okay, I'll read Ahmed's point. He says, so something related to some radical points. Please, Arabic type designers mainly need to experiment and dig into calligraphy more without the fear of being called calligraphers. Being called calligraphers is not an insult. Also, calligraphers need to get more involved into designing type and stop considering it as a threat to the script. However, the Arabic type design environment is mostly commercial, so it's more selling skills in a way. How much do you agree? Does that make sense? Do either?
Of course, there's a part of it that sells skills, but also there's the idea, the concept. I mean, the whole flow of the letters together, how they sit together. It's not, I don't think it's only selling the skill, if that answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to design a typeface. It takes a lot of time. So it's not commercially something viable to live on if you are doing it on your own without commissions. So you really need to, it takes a lot of time. So you really need to be doing something else in parallel to actually live off of it. So yes, of course, it's commercially driven at this stage, but there is a drive between us designers, those few designers, that we really need to question these things and work out of the pocket, I mean, of client-based only, and by experimenting more and yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we should write more. One thing I hate myself for is I don't share any of my acquired knowledge, which I find terrible. Because I think it would be somewhat helpful to people. And the fact of not digging into calligraphy, sorry, I disagree with you. I am one of the people amongst many others who actually dig deeply into calligraphy, and have major admiration for it. Surely will not be called calligraphers. You really need to be writing an alif 8 hours per day. And it's a very difficult craft, by the way. So definitely not insulting, on the contrary, an honor to be an Arabic calligrapher. But yeah, unfortunately, those of us working in this, we kind of work in silence, and there's so much work to do that we forget to share what we acquire in terms of knowledge that comes from the past. We're not inventing anything, but yeah, just these observations I think would be helpful indeed for people.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Arshia, is that you? Are you there?
Yeah, that's me.
Hey, go for it.
Hey, thank you for this wonderful session. Thank you, Yara and Lara. So let me rephrase my question in a less serious fashion. So my question is mainly about technology. Since we are using mostly the technology that has been developed in the West and then used for the script, and it resulted in simplifications throughout the history since the printing press till now. Do you think, how do you see the future of tools that we use for digital creation of the script? And the other way of asking it is that, do you have moments that you close your eyes and wish for a tool or a technology that could just facilitate the process of actualizing what you imagine?
Thanks.
I think, Lara, you can go first because you've been involved in
around
that.
with tools. So I always believe that the tool will not affect the design, and in some way it doesn't. But current technology does affect some design decisions and some behavior of the script. Sometimes the Arabic just doesn't get supported so well, especially in more minority languages on browsers, on etc. Because each of the tech companies has a different way of supporting text. And in a way, the field of type is always connected. This tension between form and tool, and how do we build tools to help the form? And this is kind of also the beautiful part of this field, that the more we advance in technology, the more technologies there are, the more tools we need to help ourselves create our ideas. So yeah, every day probably for me, every day I close my eyes, I'm like, oh yeah, we can build this tool and that tool and this tool and save time here. And I cannot build them. I'm not that great at scripting. So, you need other people. But imagining, sure. Plus now we're getting into metaverse. And when I looked at metaverse, I'm like, okay, now we're getting into augmented reality. So type is going to be in perspective. Does that mean that we need to make perspective fonts? Probably, because perspective, the spacing is going to go wrong. All sorts of things. I hope I answered that question in a coherent way.
Very. Yara, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
No, I think as an answer to Arshia, I think we have to do our own tools and not just answer questions asked by the Western companies. I mean, I don't like to call them Western or Eastern. It's just khalaf. East is West, West is East. It doesn't matter. When we want a tool, we should be able to script it, write it, and do it. And we're not. And that is, I think, our downfall. This is where we fall short. We don't do it. We keep waiting for others to do it for us. And then we tell them what we need. And then it goes back and forth instead of grassroots, Yeah.
Or maybe we don't share them. Maybe some people have developed tools and we don't share them.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not aware of them.
My dear Thomas and Miriam, they don't share, they want to, but it's also you need to live. It's a difficult tension on sharing or not.
Well, Lara and Yara, thank you so much for making the time, for being a part of this, for sharing your perspective with us. It's an honor to have you on the series.
Same here.
Thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Enjoy your evening or day, wherever you are, and we will see you at the next event.